This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN, who for years have delivered humanized privacy and security solutions to safeguard your data and privacy online. Virtually travel the world, browse privately by encrypting your internet activity, block ads and malware that get in your way, and much more thanks to their easy-to-use tools. Plus, get an extra 4 months when you sign up using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. More details after the video. At Gamescom this past week, Studio One More Level revealed their next big thing, Valor Mortis. Let's take a look at the trailer. So I'm not at Gamescom this week, but the studio very kindly reached out to me to ask if I wanted to play the Gamescom build, and I'm like, hell yeah, I do. Don't forget that this is the studio that made both Ghostrunner 1 and 2, fantastic first-person action games that were like spiritual successors to Mirror's Edge almost. It was blisteringly fast first-person parkour and combat, and there's a reason that there aren't too many games like this. Parkour and melee combat are typically the remit of third-person games, since it allows for more intuitive animations, and it makes it easier for players to see the environments or incoming threats. Building a game that delivers all of this in a first-person perspective is hard, but One More Level were up for the challenge, and they totally nailed it twice in a row. It's little surprise then that they've suited up for a similar challenge with their next release, Valor Mortis. The studio gave me a behind closed doors demonstration of the game prior to sending me a preview code, and I had absolutely no idea what to expect when I stepped into this meeting. When the game director told me they were making a Souls-like, I was like, oh, do we really need another one of those right now? But when he told me that it was a first-person Souls-like, I was like, okay, I see why this studio is doing this. That immediately got me thinking though, has there ever been a first-person Souls-like? And I don't think there ever has been, and that immediately got me thinking, well, why not? I mean, it's a bit of a slam dunk sell, right? Well, the answer to that question would come from the game director himself when I asked him what was the hardest part of doing a Souls-like in first-person perspective. And he told me that the fundamentals of melee combat, things like hitboxes, animation wind-ups, depth perspective, etc., they're much harder to do in first person, and that has easily been the biggest challenge the studios had to overcome as they've committed themselves to this project. In my time playing the game, I did feel some of what he was talking about, as some of the challenges he outlined remained as yet unresolved. But overall, this is definitely working, and while I know some people are experiencing acute Souls-like fatigue right now, I found the change in perspective really did wonders for making Valor Mortis feel very fresh. Some particulars first, I played this build at home on a high-end PC. I cranked the game to max settings, 4K resolution, DLSS set to quality, and ray tracing on, and that let me sit at a very comfortable 60 FPS, so I could have pushed out a lot more performance had I dropped some of those settings. Honestly, it's too early to worry about performance at this point, but the fact that it runs this well, this far out from launch, is very encouraging, since I've certainly played plenty of preview builds that ran a lot worse than this. The demo is the game's introduction, and it took me about 40 minutes to get through, though that was with a lot of messing around, exploring, dying to the last boss, etc. Definitely could have got it all done in as little as 10 or 15 minutes had I known what I was doing. The demo begins like this.
Get up, soldier. Scrub the bloody muck from your eyes.
You play as William, a fallen soldier in Napoleon's army who somehow rises from the dead. You're not the only corpse shambling around though, you just happen to be the only one who isn't a crazed zombie, as it appears as though everybody else has been hit with a big dose of the T-virus. This is actually one of Valor Mortis' most compelling hooks, its setting. The Napoleonic era has been explored in many games prior, but seeing the pomp and pageantry used as a vessel for grotesque body horror is a smart repurposing, giving twisted form to the devastating consequences of one man's maniacal ambition and ego. Napoleon will often be heard as a voice in William's head, urging him forward in difficult moments, hinting at a connection between the two that will no doubt be explored throughout the game. Much like other Souls-likes, Valor Mortis has a story, but it's focused on keeping the experience playable at all times. You will encounter NPCs who will have a few things to say, and you'll also discover various story stills that deliver a rendition of past events, but this is a game that's less reliant on narrative and more on world building and lore.
Who's alive? You fucking rats! Freedom comes at a price!
The world you're exploring is, well, honestly, it's a little hard to say at this point since I've only seen a tiny slice of it. The level I played through was a battlefield after the day was won or lost, who's to say, corpses strewn everywhere, thick mud, ruined battlements and artillery, waning fire spilling out a thick haze that obscures the horizon. It's striking and immersive, and there is something in seeing these sorts of bleak, Souls-esque environments in a first-person perspective. It sounds a little silly, I guess, but you do feel more connected to the space than if you were seeing it through a third-person perspective, because that not only has a character model in the way, but your perspective is also pulled back a fair amount. Here, tightly cropped in as it is, with nothing but your saber and your pistol to obscure your view, you're transported to this place in a way that I really felt as I explored it. One thing I will note though is that there's currently no FOV slider available, and this FOV is really tight. That can make the game unplayable for those who suffer from motion sickness, and I do wonder if One More Level plans to address it, because doing so would have a pretty profound impact on combat difficulty and overall visual presentation. But what do I mean by that? Well, I guess this is where we should start talking about combat and why no one else has dared to make a first-person Souls-like to this point. So here's how it works. Combat has one melee attack button. Hit it for a light attack, hold it for a heavy attack. There's a dodge button on the right shoulder, important for avoiding certain unblockable enemy attacks or projectiles. There's a block button, which drains stamina, and of course, hitting at the exact right time performs a parry. What you saw there was a takedown on a low-level enemy with basically no posture, because yes, this game does have a posture system similar to Sekiro. Stronger enemies and bosses will need to be hit or parried multiple times in order to stagger them, opening them up to a critical strike that will deal massive damage. So that overall combat model is really familiar if you've played a Souls-like before, but the big difference, of course, is that it's in first person, and that's cool, and I'm really into it. But One More Level still have some fine-tuning to do before all of this really clicks together. On the positive side, it's very intuitive to step into this and begin swinging, dodging, and parrying. Having played so many of these sorts of games in third person, there's a lot of novelty in the promise of being able to do it from a first person perspective, and by and large, that promise is delivered upon thanks to a satisfying parry mechanic, a responsive dodge, and some smooth feeling melee animations, plus some pretty gruesome finishes. That's my biggest takeaway from this demo, in fact. The experiment worked. A first-person Souls-like experience is possible, but it's not yet perfect. The biggest issues are the ones that the game director himself identified in our chat. Depth perception, field of view, animation telegraphs, that sort of thing. It can be tricky to judge the distance between you and your foe when you're preparing a melee swing or when they're preparing to strike you. Sometimes I'd swing and I thought I was in a position to connect, but I wasn't. Sometimes it looked like an enemy's attack would whiff when it would connect cleanly. That was rare though. A more common issue relates to the narrow field of view. If anything happens outside of your vision cone, you simply can't see it, and that's a problem when dealing with multiple enemies, though it can be overcome by managing your positioning better. A lesson I certainly learned while playing through Come Deliverance 1 and 2. It's harder to overcome when fighting larger enemy types like bosses though, since their massive unit size sees their limbs move outside of your field of view when you engage them up close. I definitely got slapped more than a few times by this guy since he's got plenty of limbs, and one or more of them could be out of my field of view at any time, and I simply had no ability to see what he was up to. Again though, I could overcome that by managing my positioning better and creating more space between he and I, but in those moments it did feel like I was kind of fighting the perspective and the boss at the same time, and I had to pull back from some of the attack windows so that I could preserve a clear view of the action. But you know what? I'm not entirely sure that that's a bad thing. I think about all the times that I just sat on a dragon's back leg in a FromSoft game and I couldn't see shit and I was just hacking away. That probably shouldn't be how you take a boss down. Here, being forced to keep a clear view of my foe created a scenario where I was forced to engage him on his terms. Often Souls-like fights against larger enemies can feel like messy brawls, but this felt much more like a proper duel. Sekiro's reliance on parrying evolved Souls-like combat to encourage a stand and fight approach, and Valer Mortis' first-person perspective seems to prompt a similar style of play. Outside of that, there's also some range combat in the form of a single-shot pistol that's mainly used to target enemy weak points for big damage, and there's also transmutations. These are essentially magic spells, and the one that's available in the demo was fire. It could be used during combat to burn enemies, but it could also be used in level exploration, since the fire could burn away a sort of corrupted foliage.
Let's see if one gesture is all it takes to get it done.
The game does promise to be a Metroidvania of sorts, and newly obtained transmutations will open up the possibility of both new combat and exploration opportunities. There's also a little bit of parkour thrown in, a bit of a nod to the developer's legacy. And that's about it, or at least that's about it for this demo, since this was only a tiny slice of what I'm sure is going to be a fairly meaty experience. Having played through it, I gotta tell you, I like this. I thought it was cool. The prospect of a first-person Souls-like made by this developer, with all their experience in making first-person action games, that was immediately an appealing prospect. And while there are still some things to iron out within the combat model, I saw more than enough to give me confidence in where one more level we're headed. The Napoleonic setting is a great choice, giving the studio a huge amount of latitude for storytelling, location, and enemy design. It already looks and runs fantastic, and it's nowhere near release. And yeah, I just think this one has a lot of promise. As I mentioned earlier, there's no shortage of Souls-likes these days. In fact, they can feel a little dime a dozen, but the perspective shift opens up a totally new spin on the classic formula, and I'm excited to play more of it. If you'd like to check it out for yourself, there's a beta coming up real soon that you can sign up for right now over on their website. It's headed to PlayStation, Xbox, and PC sometime next year. And that's all I got for you. Drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, drop it a dislike if you didn't. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. Accessing the internet is getting harder and harder every day as governments and corporations continue to enact things like age verification, geo-blocking, and straight up censorship. Thankfully, this video sponsor Surfshark VPN exists to help you take your internet freedom back, allowing you to browse the web both freely and securely. I mean, we all know about content geo-blocking, where certain TV shows, films, and games are inaccessible to you based on where you are. Surfshark lets you sidestep many of those restrictions with a click of a button, virtually teleporting you all over the world so you can watch or play whatever you please. But there's also the online shopping angle too. I mean, regional pricing is a thing, and depending on what you're buying and where it's being shipped to, certain online retailers won't let you make purchases depending on where you're located. Again, Surfshark lets you quickly and easily get around many of those restrictions so you can buy what you like and get a good deal while doing it. Of course, there's also the security angle. Surfshark encrypts your data, making it safer to browse the web, and their dedicated antivirus or alert tools take security to a whole new level, protecting you from viruses or malware and notifying you if a large-scale hack occurs that may leave your data exposed. It's super convenient since Surfshark can be used on a range of devices from PCs to phones to tablets and more, and their intuitive user interface makes it so easy to use. Sometimes it's as little as one click and you're away. I love it. I would never not have it installed on all my devices. And if you want to check it out for yourself, you can visit surfshark.com/skillup. And if you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout, you'll get an extra 4 months when you sign up. A great deal for a great product. That's surfshark.com/skillup. Offer code SKILLUP at checkout for an extra 4 months. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.